Welcome back to yet another session of Winked Unplugged live sessions that we've been doing starting last week. And last week we spoke about fear. And, it was amazing. I got so many comments on fear. It seems like it did resonate. And there are a couple that actually stayed with me, which I want to talk about today. The first one is there was one comment from Nalini, and Nalini mentioned that she had fear of riding horses. And every time she would get on a horse, she would think like she's going to fall off. And literally, every time she got on a horse, she did fall off. So she literally would be like on a horse saying, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, and literally fall. And then over a period of time, she developed confidence. And the horse sensed that she had confidence. And literally, she barely needed to move the rein for the horse to listen to her. And it made me wonder, do our fears create our own reality? Or do realities reinforce certain fears? It's a $1 million question. We don't really know where these fears come from. And the more we fear something, maybe the more it happens in our life. I can definitely say that in my life. I remember when I was a kid, my mom was a teacher, so she was very, very keen that we did really well in school. So she would expect us to do exceedingly, exceedingly well, top the class if possible. And I remember thinking, I'm so unlucky. The one thing that I don't study shows up at the exam. And of course, I don't know the answer because that's the one thing I haven't studied. And it continued all through school, through undergrad. And then somewhere, I don't know what happened, I changed my mind. I don't know what epiphany I had. And I said, you know what, I'm so lucky. And things just work out my way, and life supports me, and life's got my back. And the moment that happened, guess what happened? That is what started manifesting. I would, staying with exams, I went to B school, and one or two things that I wouldn't study, I could literally confidently leave them, knowing completely well that they will never show up in the exam. And it was fascinating. The more confidence that I had that it wouldn't show up, the more it did not show up. So it makes me wonder whether we manifest our own fears. Bryn said something again in the comments which stayed with me, and she said, I have fear of being rejected. And every time we have that fear and a rejection happens, it reinforces the fear, right? It could be in a lot of our cases what people think of us. And we think that people might be saying bad things about us or their opinions. And the more we worry about it, the more it kind of comes back, and we're like, I always knew it. I couldn't trust people because they might be saying not so positive things. I'll give another story. None of these can be completed without a story about Aniket, my husband, right? Because, for the last 1 year, we've been locked together. So there are so many stories that I have only of Aniket. So Aniket, for those of you who know him, is one of those people who is very happy-go-lucky. A friend of ours also calls him #a poet, which is when he lives in his own world, he's really happy, doesn't really care. And every time I'm in the kitchen with him, things drop, things burn, it becomes a little bit of a mess. And Aniket's response to me is, it's you. Because you think I'm going to do it, that's why it happens. Now, God only knows whether it's me invoking that kind of reality or it's actually happening around, it's actually him. Because I'm never there. When I'm not there, I don't know really what happens. But it makes me wonder how much we believe our own stories. And the more we believe our stories, the more we manifest them. So I'm wondering if you guys have had similar experiences where you've had maybe a fear or you've had a certain discomfort or some kind of stress. And the more you don't want something to happen, the more it happens. In some ways, it's like we've attracted it towards ourselves. I can say from my personal experience, there have been many a time, I'm not a morning person. So often when we would have very early morning meetings, which a lot of times senior leaders love to do, I would find it really tough because I have like a morning routine of yoga and meditation, and kind of getting up early for a really early morning meeting was not me. And I might be running late, and or I would tell myself the night before, don't run late, get up early, all of that. And the more I would tell myself not to do it, the more it would kind of start showing up, to the point where I would sit in an Uber so that I'm not late, I don't take the subway, and I would find like the slowest Uber driver on the planet, right? And he would take like the worst route possible, and I would be seething. I'm like, oh my God, I should have either gotten up early, or I shouldn't do this, and I'm going to be late, and I'm going to be late. And I realized in one of my Uber rides, I just centered myself and I said, it's going to be okay. And if I'm late, oh well, right? I'm just going to tell my associate I'm running late for the meeting, let my boss know I'm going to be late for this meeting. And the moment I centered myself, guess what? The traffic would change, the Uber driver would start going in the right direction. And that is when I realized that a lot of times the manifestation might be on the outside, but the trigger is 100% on the inside. So, how do we untrigger the things that we don't want? And for me, and in my experience, it's been about just centering myself. At that moment, instead of feeding into the outcome that I don't want and saying, I don't want it, I don't want it, why is this happening, questioning it, just centering, connecting back to the deepest part of myself, which is normally very calm and very chill and very patient. And once I connect back over there, I recognize that when I come back into the world of activity, I come back a different person. And therefore, the activity has a completely different, the activity changes too. I don't know how else to explain it, but that has been my experience with this. So I'm just wondering, oh, Aniket's saying this, manifestation is on the outside, but the trigger's on the inside. And so many times we try to fix the outside, right? If I could only fix something on the outside, everything would be fine. But we seldom look where the trigger is. It's a little bit like we're trying to turn the lights off and we don't know where the switch is. And we're a little bit frustrated as to why can't we switch the light off or on? And all we need to recognize is, where is the switch? And for a lot of what happens on the outside, the switch is on the inside. Whatever our fear might be, it could be, like I said last week, the fear of hurting my body, or the fear, like Nalini said, of riding a horse, or Bryn said, the fear of being rejected, or the fear of opinions, or whatever it might be. Just know that while everything's happening on the inside, the control switch is actually on the inside. So I'm just going to pause there, see if there are any questions that you have, or any thoughts that you have around this before we kind of go further into this conversation, or if there's anything else that you want me to talk about, I'm happy to. But this is what was playing on my mind today as I saw the messages from Nalini and Bryn. So Calvin says, how do you access the switch? I think the biggest or the best or the fastest way is to just disconnect with what's happening on the outside. Our senses keep pulling us on the outside, the eyes, the ears, all of them. So if for a few seconds you can just withdraw them, take your attention away from the scenery into the seer, which is who you are, and go to the deepest part of who you are. And for me, the breath is really helpful. If I can just bring my awareness to the breath and take deep inhalations, exhalations, and for a few seconds, I don't really worry about what's happening on the outside. The world could literally dissolve. It can do whatever it needs to. They don't need me for the next few seconds or the next minute or so. The moment I can center myself, that's the best way to say it, I have accessed the switch. And from there, whichever way I move, I know I'm moving in alignment with nature and in alignment with where I'm supposed to be moving. So Calvin, great question. That has been my experience. And the more we meditate, the easier it becomes to access that switch. So meditation definitely is one of the ways, and the breath for me. Anything else that you guys have in terms of questions? That was a really good one. Calvin, you're on a roll today. Is comfort zone a result of fear? It's such a good question. Yeah, comfort zone is a result of fear. I do think comfort zone is. And I'll share another experience, another story, my personal story. Ever since I was a little kid, people will often say, Ruchika, she has so much potential or so intelligent. And what happens with that is you learn, you begin to play not to lose and not play to win. And it seems like it's the same thing, but it's not. The way you show up is very, very different. You show up to defend a point of view rather than play offense, which is what we need to do to get out of the comfort zone or to try something new. And For many, many years, I played it safe because that is comfort. It's easy to live in potentiality and say, oh my God, there's such high potential, rather than go out there and fail, right? Because the fear of failure comes up. And then a few years back, I decided, you know what? It was not worth living like that. I needed to follow my dreams and my passion. And even if I failed, it's okay. But at least I would feel more alive and more joy, and of course, more challenged. Calvin, that has been my one step into getting out of fear. And for me, it's the fear of failure, right? And also, leaning into it and saying, okay, what'll happen? What's the worst thing that'll happen if I fail? I might make fun of myself. Other people might make fun of me. My ego might get bruised a little bit, but it's okay. So I think just knowing that fear is actually holding us back and saying, so what? What's the worst thing that can happen? Just a little bit of pain, a little bit of discomfort doesn't really matter. But yes, comfort zone is potentially coming out of fear. The second thing that comfort zone can also come out of is laziness. And I've seen that, right? Sometimes you're like, I just don't want to do it. I feel lazy, or there's procrastination. So comfort zone can come out of laziness and fear, both of them. Anything else that's coming up? If not, then I'm going to leave you with just a couple of thoughts. One is, instead of believing what's happening on the outside and letting that be what drives your story, just recognize that you can rewrite your story by just looking inside and rearranging the story the way you want it to, and the triggers on the inside. And I think it was a great question that, Calvin, you asked. How do you kind of how do you get out of your comfort zone? Because it is comfortable for a little while, but then it starts suffocating us, right? So that is why we need to push outside the comfort zone, because just because we're in comfort zone doesn't mean we're comfortable. As an oxymoron, sometimes we need to get out of the comfort zone to actually feel comfort. And that can come in when we can lean into it and not really feed into the fear. And also realize what's the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing in our mind is always much bigger than what really happens. So both of those things, if we can kind of stay with it this week and keep going back to where the switch is, go back to where the control is, and then switch it around to whatever you want for this week. And then we'll connect back next week. And again, if you have certain thoughts, topics, questions, definitely put it in the chat or in the comments, and maybe we'll take it up next week, next Thursday, same time. Until then, ponder on these two things and keep connecting back to yourself. And one of the things that we're looking to do is adult joyfully. So keep connecting back to yourself so you can adult joyfully. Okay? Bye. Have a great Thursday.